Hey, how are you? It's Mike. Here I am in my hotel room in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm here for the long week, Christmas week, see my family and all that kind of stuff. But this morning I put up this post on Facebook that I think is pretty interesting that you might get a kick out of. And it says, I'm looking to do a video for men for next week. And for the life of me, I can't find a good question from a guy. Guys, what have you got? And there's actually one really great question, a couple other pretty good ones that came up here. I'm only going to cover one in this particular video. But I do think it's really interesting for the men and the women who are watching this, how whenever I ask anything that's aimed at men on my Facebook wall, we get, I'd say, about 10 times as many women as men actually answering. A lot of times women will actually post what they want guys to ask or what they want guys to want to know, or they'll kind of go after guys. In this case, it's really kind of fascinating because several women, I'm not going to call them out by name, criticized men for not being communicative enough to ask questions or something like that, which I personally find kind of absurd. But anyway, there's one really good question that a guy named Greg Timmons put up here. And here it is. You should be able to see it on your screen. Greg Timmons, with his awesome Nirvana-based icon on his Facebook there, says, why do women fall madly in love with us, then try to change us? Why do we need to change if we were worthy of your love in the first place? And Greg, that's an awesome question. In fact, I could probably write paragraphs and paragraphs and thousands of words on this particular question. And it's actually one I actually asked my girlfriend and her mom and my mom when we were sitting down at breakfast this morning about this one. It has to do with a few different things. There actually is an old adage that people say about men and women in relationships, which is that women think that men will change and men think that women never will. Again and again, I see this in the work that I do. We talk to people and they say, when I talk to women, they say, well, I married him thinking that he was going to become my Prince Charming, all this kind of thing. And then 20 years later, he still won't put the toilet seat down. He still won't do this. He's still not as romantic as I want him to be. And a lot of men seem to think they marry a woman who is fun and exciting and erotic and loves him for being him. And then 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, all of a sudden she's gone from being that girl that he fell in love with, who was so easy to be with, to being an actual woman who is a little bit more difficult to have around. But Greg, your particular question, why do women fall madly in love with us and then try to change us? Why do we need to change if we were worthy of your love in the first place? Has to do with a couple of different answers. One is simply the biological aspect of love. People think that love is this great spiritual, emotional kind of thing, and to some degree it is, but the love that you experience when you first fall in love with somebody is almost purely biological. It has to do with evolutionary theory, has to do with basically finding somebody whose genes will hopefully be compatible with yours, and so you can go off and have kids together and procreate and keep our species around. And that love is ultimately incredibly irrational. When you're in love with somebody, especially at the beginning, they overwhelm your senses. You think about them all the time. They become the be-all, end-all of what you want in the world. I know for me, my girlfriend's a redhead, and when I first met her and became intoxicated by her, I saw redheads everywhere, and I found redheads incredibly attractive all of a sudden, even though they weren't really my thing before. That's one of the reasons. And then over time, that love drug aspect, I think it's over a few years at the best, that aspect of where the love is so overwhelming that you'll forgive everything kind of falls apart. And then people, both men and women, start looking at their partner and thinking, hey, you're not really exactly what I thought you were in the first place. This is why in programs like Text the Romance Back and things like that, I talk about how love is ultimately a choice. Love is a choice that you make every single day. And women and men who write into me, they say, Michael, how do I get the spark back? How do I create that love again? And I say that you wake up every single day and you look at that man or that woman in bed next to you and you say, I love you. And here's why. By the way, here's what I love about you. When I talk to a lot of people who say there's anger and problems in their relationships, I say one really easy exercise you can do is simply to say, instead of just saying, I love you, you say, I love you because. I love you because of the way your arms feel around me. I love you because you're a great dad. I love you because, all these other kind of things. But the other reason that women get so angry in relationships is because of what I call the myth of Prince Charming. And I talk about this myth of Prince Charming a lot in the material I do for women. And it has to do with a lot of women, especially the women that are on our email list and on our Facebook wall, write in, and they're extremely angry, and they're extremely beat up, and they're extremely disappointed in the quality of the men they've been with over the years. And now that might be partly because of the irrational things that men want. I talk to a lot of women in their 50s and 60s who say, all the guys out there who are my age only want to date women in their 40s who won't challenge them or things like that. But it also has to do with stupid expectations. A lot of women, by the way, if you read romance novels, if you read through women's magazines, Teen Beat magazines, all these kind of things, you'll see this recurring myth of the Prince Charming, of the perfect man, the man with the perfect jaw who will never look at another woman, who will never even consider cheating, who has a great job, or at least is a prince, so money kind of flows into his pockets magically. And a lot of women have a hard time dealing with the reality of what men really are. They end up with a guy, he's a good guy, he's got a decent job, he works, he's nice to her in a lot of ways, but he's not perfect. And women, I don't know if it's because of biology or just because of the way they are oftentimes seeking perfection in their partner. Now that's converse to what I think a lot of guys are like. A lot of guys aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for a good woman, a good wife, a good girlfriend, who's happy, really. A lot of guys, what they really just want is a happy wife, a happy girlfriend, someone who's not going to be too demanding. That's also kind of an irrational choice. But really, the reason they want you to change is because you're not living up to this absolute, utter unattainable perfection that a lot of women seem to think they want. And this builds up bitterness over time. A lot of women have a really hard time, and I'm sure guys do too, but we're talking about women here, letting go of the negatives. My own girlfriend does this sometimes. I'm a pretty darn good guy. I'm a good boyfriend. I'm a good provider. I do all these wonderful things for her, but I leave the toilet seat up sometimes, or I'm not as clean as she'd like me to be, or I forget to do the dishes sometimes, and all those kinds of things. And it creates this recurring kind of bitterness that builds up over time, where in the back of her mind, she's like, all she can focus on is the negative. So that's why she wants you to change, because on her list, you might fill 5 of 7 or 15 of 23 perfect things that she wants. But you're never going to fill all of them. And because you're not going to fill all of them, that builds up bitterness, resentment, anger, all those sorts of things. So that's why she wants you to change, because you're not filling the image of the dream of what she wanted when she was a little girl, the prince that was going to come in and sweep her off her feet. You're not enough of the perfect man. And in a future video, I'm going to talk to you about how to deal with that, about what you should do about the fact that you're competing with Prince Charming. You're competing with the invisible man. I'm not a perfect guy. You're not a perfect guy. But in my next video that I'll probably put up in a few days or next week, I'm going to talk to you about what you can do to be, if not perfect, to help her see you for the good that you actually are. Okay. And also, guys, I need more questions from guys, both for these videos and for my newsletters. So I'd be really, really happy if you would go down to the YouTube comment box down below and comment on this video, talk about it, and also put in a question of your own. Put in a question and talk to me about what you want to know about women. And I'd really like to see questions that are not super duper specific around like, how do I get my ex back or things like that. But what do you want to know about the female viewpoint, about how women think, what women want, either sexually or non-sexually in relationships, things like that. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.